welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. The Philadelphia Eagles are back in action this Sunday afternoon, taking on the San Francisco 49ers. And while this is already a huge game for the Eagles and a game that has been highly anticipated by the entire league, the NFL on Tuesday afternoon made it bigger by releasing scenarios in which the Philadelphia Eagles could become the first team in the league to punch their ticket to the playoffs.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
That's right, Jim Mora. We are talking about playoffs today. And if the Eagles defeat or tie the San Francisco 49ers this week, we will be in a good position for a playoff berth clinch this season, assuming that we get some help from some other teams in the league. Now, I'll go through the scenarios in just a few moments, but the big thing to take away is that the Eagles have to defeat or tie the 49ers in order for any of this to be in play. If the Eagles lose to the 49ers, there is no scenario this week in which the Philadelphia Eagles could clinch a playoff berth. They could still clinch one in a future week, but the Eagles have to defeat or tie the 49ers in order to be able to clinch a playoff berth in Week 13. Now, later on this week, we will take a look at the Eagles game itself and take a look at what it's going to take for this Eagles team to defeat the San Francisco 49ers. But for today's episode, I wanted to take a moment to just take a look at the help that the Eagles are going to need in order to clinch that playoff spot. So by far and away, the most straightforward way in which the Philadelphia Eagles could clinch a playoff spot is by defeating the San Francisco 49ers. If that happens, we certainly don't need as much help. There are a couple of scenarios that would play out, and the first of those scenarios would be if the Los Angeles Rams lose or tie the Cleveland Browns in their matchup on Sunday afternoon. Now, of all of the help, I think this is going to be the most likely help that we get. The Los Angeles Rams certainly lost to us earlier in the season, and right now they're not playing all that great football. In addition to the Philadelphia Eagles, the Rams have also lost to the 49ers, Cowboys, Steelers, Bengals, and Packers, and certainly those are all names that are in the conversation surrounding the playoff picture. And not only have they lost to those teams, for the most part, the losses haven't been close. By far and away, the closest loss that the Los Angeles Rams have had was their loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, where they lost by a field goal. The Rams have defeated their division rivals, but honestly, given how good the Cleveland Browns are right now, the fact that they're coming out of one of the most competitive divisions in the NFL right now, and the fact that the Cleveland Browns are 7-4 and have defeated a number of the teams that I just mentioned. The Cleveland Browns opened the season with a victory over the Cincinnati Bengals, and they've also beaten other members of their division, which again is one of the most competitive in the NFL at this point. I don't anticipate the Los Angeles Rams are going to be able to overcome the Cleveland Browns. So I do think that we're going to get help from the Los Angeles Rams regardless of the situation. That having been said, on any given Sunday, any given team can defeat any other given team. It's entirely plausible, and the Eagles are the first team to be able to testify to that because the Philadelphia Eagles lost to the New York Jets, the only team that the Eagles have lost to so far this season. So what happens if the Rams are able to pull off an upset against the Cleveland Browns? Well, the Philadelphia Eagles are still able to get some help to clinch a playoff berth. They would just need it to come from elsewhere in the league, and that elsewhere specifically would need to be from the NFC North. They would need the Detroit Lions to lose to the New Orleans Saints, and they would need the Green Bay Packers to lose or tie the Kansas City Chiefs. If both of those things happen, the Eagles would make the playoffs, assuming that the Eagles defeat the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I'm going to start with the Green Bay Packers because I think of those two teams, the Packers are more likely to give us help. The Packers are 5-6 right now, and again, they're taking on the 8-3 Kansas City Chiefs, who are, again, playoff contenders. And in addition to that, The Packers are in an evaluation year right now. They are dealing with a new starting quarterback in Jordan Love. They're taking stock of other players that could potentially make up the team's future. They're taking stock of coaching staff and other aspects of the Green Bay Packers organization. So they are not expecting to make the playoffs. Now, they're still in the hunt, but it would not be a surprise to most Packers fans if the Green Bay Packers miss the playoffs this year. In addition to that, so far this season, the Packers have demonstrated that, for the most part, they don't really start in the first half. They tend to get moving towards the second half. And the Kansas City Chiefs, again, being the Super Bowl defending champions and being in the conversation for the playoffs this season, are very, very likely to get started in the first half. All we have to do is look at the Eagles matchup against that team. The Kansas City Chiefs ran 120 plus yards all over us during the first half alone and scored all of their points in the first half. So the Kansas City Chiefs are going to get off to a hot start, most likely. And if the Green Bay Packers live up to what they were doing earlier in the season, combined with a run defense that can absolutely be taken advantage of, I'm not expecting that the Green Bay Packers are going to be up to the task of defeating the Kansas City Chiefs or even tying the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think that we're going to get help from Green Bay. So now we'll turn to the Detroit Lions, who are 8-3 and are atop the NFC North. The Lions are on a tear right now, and even though they lost on Thanksgiving to the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions fan base is blaming the moon for this. They did split with the Packers, and they have defeated a number of other playoff contenders, notably the Kansas City Chiefs, who they defeated in their kickoff game during week 1. The Lions are a powerhouse offense right now, and except for 1 week when they lost to the Ravens, the Lions have put up at least 20 points on their opponents. They will be facing off against the New Orleans Saints, and I'm going to touch on the New Orleans Saints in a second because they will come back up in their own right in terms of how they can give us some help. But at the end of the day, the New Orleans Saints, I'm not expecting are going to be up to the task of defeating the Detroit Lions. So the Detroit Lions should take care of the New Orleans Saints handily. And because of that, I'm not looking at this scenario where the Eagles win and the Detroit Lions lose and the Green Bay Packers lose or tie as a viable scenario for us to get into the playoffs. Now, if the Philadelphia Eagles tie the San Francisco 49ers, there are still ways that the team could punch their ticket to the playoffs this week, but they'd be a lot harder because the team would need a lot more help from the rest of the league. There are 2 scenarios. Both scenarios require the Los Angeles Rams to lose, no longer just tie, but lose to the Cleveland Browns, and they require the Green Bay Packers to lose or tie the Kansas City Chiefs. If both of those 2 things happen, then either the Atlanta Falcons or the New Orleans Saints would need to lose to or tie their opponents. Now, the New Orleans Saints, I think, are far more likely of the Saints or the Falcons to lose on Sunday or to tie on Sunday. As I mentioned, they are facing off against the Detroit Lions powerhouse offense, and while the New Orleans Saints are currently tied for first place in the NFC South, they are tied with the Atlanta Falcons and they're tied at 5-6. So the NFC South is certainly the weakest division collectively of all of the divisions in the NFL right now. And it doesn't bode well for the New Orleans Saints. In addition, when the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons faced off last week, the Saints lost to the Falcons, and the Saints have also lost to some stronger playoff contenders. The Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Minnesota Vikings all defeated the Saints, and while some of the Saints' losses were close, some of them have not been, especially their loss to their division rival and the team that's in third place in the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now remember, the Eagles defeated the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by more than 2 scores. It's the only game that the Eagles have played in where they have done that. And for the Buccaneers to come in and defeat the Saints by a lot is definitely concerning for Saints fans. In addition, the Lions offense is top 10 in rushing, and that Lions offense should clobber the Saints' bottom 12 rushing defense. So I'm fully expecting the Saints to lose on Sunday. As for the Atlanta Falcons, they're facing off against the New York Jets, and that game is going to be about as tough to predict as it's going to be to watch. They did just beat the Saints, and to their credit, they also beat a couple of playoff contenders right now in the Packers and certainly the Houston Texans, which is definitely an impressive win for them. But at the same time, they've also lost to some of those strong playoff contenders. And they've also lost to some very bad teams. The Lions, Jaguars, and Vikings, all of whom are playoff contenders, defeated the Falcons, but they also lost to the Arizona Cardinals, who right now are vying for a top 10 draft pick, as have the Tennessee Titans and the Washington Commanders. And the Jets are a weird team right now because the Jets are by record a worse team than the Atlanta Falcons. The Jets are 4-7, the Falcons are 5-6. The Jets right now are in the middle of a quarterback crisis as well, with Aaron Rodgers going down 4 plays into their first game against the Buffalo Bills. Zach Wilson came in, and Zach Wilson has been playing and he was actually benched in favor of Tim Boyle. And Tim Boyle just led one of the worst performances in this entire season on the Black Friday game. But that having been said, the Jets are the only team to have defeated the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Jets have also beaten other teams. The Jets won that Monday Night Football kickoff against the Buffalo Bills. And the Jets have won a couple of other games. And again, they're a really weird team right now. So I'm not 100% sure who would actually win this game. My gut is telling me right now that the Atlanta Falcons are the better team in this and should defeat the New York Jets. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this game goes one way or the other. But I'm leaning Falcons right now simply because of how the Jets are and also because of the Jets quarterback situation that's going on over there. So at the end of the day, I think we're more likely to get help from the Saints than we are to get from the Falcons. So if we're going to rank these teams by most likely to give us help in these playoff scenarios given to us by the NFL, my ranking is going to be Rams, Saints, Packers, Falcons, and Lions, which means that the most likely way for the Eagles to punch their ticket to the playoffs this week would be for them to defeat the 49ers and then the Los Angeles Rams lose to the Cleveland Browns. That, I think, is the most likely scenario that happens. The second scenario that the NFL gave us, with the Eagles winning, the Detroit Lions losing, and the Green Bay Packers losing or tying, I don't think is going to happen. I don't think that the Detroit Lions are going to lose to the New Orleans Saints. I actually think it's going to be the other way around. If the Eagles do tie the San Francisco 49ers, which is possible because we took the Bills to overtime last week and the 49ers are a better team, then my bet would be that we're more likely to get help from the combination that includes the Rams, the Packers, and the Saints compared to the combination that includes the Rams, Packers, and Falcons. I think the Falcons are more likely to defeat the New York Jets, and therefore the Saints are going to probably be more likely to provide us the help. So those are my thoughts on the playoff scenarios, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Where do you think we're going to get the help from if we're able to punch our ticket to the postseason this week? Let me know. And thank you so much to everybody for tuning into the Bird's Nest podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube and by sharing to your social media pages. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Amazon Podcasts, and Spotify. Please visit birdsnestmedia.com for additional Eagles coverage. And if you feel so inclined to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below or at birdsnestmedia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go Eagles!